Good afternoon. My name is Bethany Wiggin. I'm the director of the Penn Program in Environmental Humanities at the University of Pennsylvania. It's my great pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to Solar Imaginaries, Play and Pragmatism in Energy Futures. Today, as we launch this three-part program, and you can see the whole trilogy here on the bottom of the screen, we're delighted to host artists Christina, Hemauer, and Keller to discuss their poignant film, A Road Not Taken, and other aspects of their work. Christina and Roman have generously made available A Road Not Taken on the PPEH website, as well as their shorter film, Sun of 1913. In case you didn't have time to screen those films yet, they will be available for you on the website until March 4th. And really sincere thanks to you, Christina and Roman, for allowing us to feature the films. You will hear a more fulsome introduction to their work in just a few minutes, presented by PPEH artists in residence, Kristen, Neville, Taylor, and Ricky Yanas. In just a moment, this year's topic director, Professor Daniel Barber, will introduce Kristen and Ricky to you before we then turn things over to Christina and Roman for their remarks, followed by a question and answer interactive session hosted by Kristen and Ricky. Amidst the difficult circumstances besetting us, Daniel Barber has curated a luminous constellation of artists, scholars, activists, thinkers, and doers to explore the line between transitions and transformations. He has offered us all this year at PPH a kind of North Star, a beacon for the collaborative communities, the cross-sector partnerships, and the generous thinking that we so desperately need. Daniel Barber is the Associate Professor and Chair of the Graduate Group in Architecture at the Weitzman School of Design. He is the author of A House in the Sun, Modern Architecture and Solar Energy in the Cold War, which came out from Oxford University Press in 2016. His latest book, Modern Architecture and Climate, Design Before Air Conditioning, appeared just last year with Princeton University Press. He's the co-editor of a series of dossiers on the subject of accumulation for the eFlux Architecture Forum, and he has had more fellowships than one could name in a short introduction. Suffice to say, he has had one from the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and has been a visiting professor in the environment and humanities at what used to be named the Princeton Environmental Institute and is now the High Meadow Environmental Institute at Princeton University. As Daniel's publications and projects demonstrate, he is an indefatigable collaborator, and I am so delighted to be working with him this year on this annual topic of transitions and transformations. In characteristic fashion, Daniel has designed this programming to allow for maximal collaboration and public engagement, even in, or maybe especially in, the time of COVID. So please join me in giving Daniel a warm welcome as our topic director, and over to you, Daniel.
Great, thank you so much, Bethany. Thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. That was a very generous introduction, and it really has been a pleasure to take this time with the Penn Program in Environmental Humanities this year to think through these issues, and as Bethany suggests, to bring in a sort of host of collaborators and really to kind of hopefully really serve as a means to gather some of these discussions and inspire ourselves and others in the process. This three-part series on the solar imaginary, obviously very close to my heart and work, given my own interest in thinking through the solar capacity, the possibilities of solar living and sort of ways of thinking and designing for solar energy. In this context, these programs were really kind of opening out to a very heterogeneous and compelling range of scholars and artists and practitioners in many fields, policymakers, activists, community organizers, to think through not only the sort of, or not really at all the technical possibilities of the solar transition, but more appropriately, the transformative capacities of the solar imaginary. The annual PPEH theme on transition transformation is rooted in the premise that the urgency of climate justice points us towards a need to examine transformative rather than transitional practices in scholarship, in art and design, in public policy. How our programming hopes to ask, do dreams of techno fixes forestall the possibility of radical change? And how can we begin to sort of think around and through those challenges and obstacles to get at a real kind of vision of different ways of life? So the aim of the topic in general is to encourage discussion around this transformational imperative. I couldn't have been more pleased when Bethany and I began to have these discussions, and she suggested that we bring in Kristen, Neville, Taylor, and Ricky Yanas to join us. It's been a really inspiring set of discussions and collaborations all along, and we'll see them again for the next few weeks as they continue with their artist in residency at PPEH. I'm going to introduce them briefly. I'm not making too many comments here because we have a couple of layers of introduction to get through, right? We want to get to the heart of the matter. But just to get them all on your radar and their amazing work. Kristen Neville Taylor is an artist working in drawing, sculpture, glass, and installation. Her process has been described as alchemical and utilizes pseudoscientific experimentation to reimagine our relationship to nature and nature futures. Taylor's work has been widely shown, among other venues, Vox Populi, the Woodmere Art Museum, and the Philadelphia Art Alliance, Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland, and Expo Chicago. She's active as a curator, having organized several exhibitions, including Landscape Techne at Little Berlin, at the Usable Earth at Esther Klein Gallery, and others. Taylor is the recipient of the Laurie Wagman Prize in Glass, a recycled artist in residence, and a Vermont Studio Center Fellowship, and a recent alumni of Vox Populi Gallery and the co-founder of Little Berlin, the Philadelphia Art Gallery and Collective. Since 2007, she has taught courses in glass and material studies at the University of the Arts, Tyler School of Art and Architecture, and the Moore College of Art Graduate Studies program. So thank you so much, Kristen, for all your efforts here, and certainly welcome to remotely to our discussions here at PPEH. Ricky Yanas is a Texas-born artist, educator, and curator, working within a pragmatic tradition of problem finding, and I think that's an important kind of suggestion there, right? Ricky aims to create intersectional spaces of inquiry and mutual engagement through art making and art thinking. Recent projects include Extension or Communication, Puerto Rico, at Tiger Strike's Asteroid Gallery, one of our sort of local treasures in Philadelphia, in collaboration with the Talle Puertorriqueño, as well as the Green Sun, a collaboration with Kristen, and that sort of served as the foundation for a lot of our discussions leading to the artist in residency that we're in effect launching collectively tonight. So I'm very happy to turn it over to the two of you and look forward to the presentations and further discussions. And just a brief plug to join us for the next 2 Thursdays as well, as this discussion will continue. We hope to see you again then. So Ricky and Kristen, welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you, Bethany. I have a little thing I'm going to read here, and then Kristen will add to it. But before we begin, I want to just note that Kristen and I would like to acknowledge that we come to this series not as specialists, but as artists with a desire to better understand energy and its history, with a curiosity about the sun and its material role in the future, and with a sense of urgent responsibility as cultural workers to help envision a path to that future. At this point in time, with the massive failure of power and powers that be in my home state of Texas, this line of thinking feels all the more critical. With that, we want to say how excited we are to be here today with across oceans, across time zones with Christina Hemauer and Keller. We first learned about their work in 2018 when we were researching solar power for our project, The Green Sun, an art exhibition and symposium about solar energy and its technical and narrative possibilities. The title Green Sun borrows from a quote by J.R.R. Tolkien that asks what it takes to construct a believable world in the mind of readers. It's also through this project that we first had the privilege of working with Bethany Wiggin, thank you, Bethany, who was a moderator for our symposium and who introduced us to Daniel and his work. Daniel and Bethany, thank you so much for making this possible, making it possible for us not only to be here today, but also helping us follow this trajectory from the Green Sun onward. Kristen?
Thanks, Turkey. So during our research, we had learned that Christina and Roman had actually visited Philadelphia in 2008. Specifically, they came to a neighborhood in the Northeast called Tacony to research the work of the late inventor Frank Schumann. In his lab in Tacony, Schumann had created the design for one of the largest working solar engines of his time. Roman and Christina went on to recreate, I should say, part of Schumann's original design, along with a film for the Cairo Biennial. And hopefully everyone had a chance to watch that short film. It was important to us that we were able to launch this program series with Christina and Roman in order to connect Philadelphia to its own significant solar energy history and to highlight the role that art and artists can have in shaping energy narratives. We admire Roman and Christina's practice for their long commitment to making work about the role of energy in our lives, with projects like A Chronology of Energy and Art-Related Developments, which is a timeline of energy juxtaposed with art historical events, to put it simply, and their project, The Energy Is Us, a post-petrol choir performance. In these projects, and as you can tell from their films, Roman and Christina have a highly collaborative practice that connects people across disciplines to demonstrate the complicated relationship between humans and nature through films, performances, installations, and publications. We ask that everyone watch their films today prior to this program, but as Bethany mentioned, they will be on view through March 4th. So thank you so much, Roman and Christina. And without further ado, we want to turn it over to you all. And then hopefully everyone can join in through the chat with some questions for a Q&A after.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Thanks a lot for the invitation. We will now share our screen with you and we'll turn off the camera and just hope it works as well as it worked before. So while preparing the following presentation, hopefully you can see now a black screen. We found some footage we never have shown in public so far.
And well, we try to put those projects and the current work together in a kind of personal way because they are all somehow interconnected.
And we will first give you some insights of the developments of the two pioneer solar projects, Sun 1913 and A Road Not Taken. And if there is time left, we can talk a little bit about our current work.
And
so welcome.
Yeah, welcome to Hotel Petrol. Well, our work on many projects actually started when we visited Istanbul in 2005, and there is a Hotel Petrol, and we were totally immediately taken by this charming name of a hotel, which formerly has been, sorry for that picture, a gas station, and we found it just wonderful.
Yeah, actually, this gasoline station, or nowadays the hotel, is just opposite the Blue Mosque and not far from Hagia Sophia. The idea that the petrol-driven centuries have already been over by this sign saying Hotel Petrol was such a relaxing and liberating feeling that we decided
well, we have something in the window, we have a chaos.
We decided to proclaim a new chapter in art history, the so-called post-petrolism.
Okay. A year later, we had written a manifesto and heralded the beginning of an epoch after the fossil fuel.
And led it staged by an actor and followed by some post-petrolistic party
people. And after the performance, we installed a sign which said, at this place, post-petrolism was heralded on April 27 in 2006. This sign was hanging there until recently, remembering the proclamation.
But the plot changed ownership and the sign is now removed, unfortunately.
During the research for this manifesto, we stumbled over Jimmy Carter's thermal solar installation on the West Wing of the White House. We were really surprised by the fact that the next president took the panels down for political reasons.
So a road not taken.
We discovered one night. We discovered a webpage of the Unity College in Maine, where they tried to auction some of the former White House solar panels. That was, for us, that was a very crucial moment, that we might be able to touch those things or to do something with them. And so we contacted the college and found out that the webpage was outdated, but then agreed with the college to travel back with 2 of the panels to Washington, D.C., to the Museum of American History, and then to the Carter Library and Museum in Atlanta, Georgia.
As you get to know in the movie, the college had acquired them from a government services administration warehouse near DC in 1992. Peter Marbach, the former college administrator, drove down with an old school bus to get them to Unity. Some could have been installed with the help of donors on the roof of the cafeteria.
And well, at the White House, the solar system was also supporting the hot water system of the cafeteria.
The rest of the panels was stored in an old Quaker church nearby.
We packed two of those panels on a grease-powered truck from Unity College students and headed down south, as you know from the movie.
So the footage was first shown in a solo show in Fribourg, Switzerland, 2007. The title of the show was a quotation from the dedication speech, a curiosity, a museum piece, and an example of a road not taken.
We tried to rebuild the situation on the roof of the White House in the museum and reenacted the inauguration speech from June 1979.
And again, with the help of an actor looking a little bit like President Carter, we reenacted the speech.
We only changed the times in the inauguration speech. When there was in the year 2000, for example, we changed that to 20 years from now. And the reenactment was very touching, well, sad, because, well, it sounded really contemporary.
In the room behind the stage, we projected a screen with the trip and a monitor with the interviews. Of course, we invited Jimmy Carter for the opening. He used to be sometimes at Geneva at the UN. And on the very day of the opening, he sent us an appointment for an interview some weeks later.
We knew by that time that this was a very special thing, because Jimmy Carter normally gives interviews only in the context of his own projects. For example, Al Gore didn't get the opportunity for his film. Oh, no, it's in the. Well, there's a little story behind this invitation. On our first trip to Georgia, we went to Plains where Jimmy Carter and Rosalind live, and he gives Sunday school in the church every couple of weeks. And the church agreed that we can put the panel in front of the building so that we can show it to the Carters. But then we came out, but when we came out of the church during the break, the panel was gone. The Secret Service had put it away because they said the dog didn't like it.
And we were told that we can take the opportunity to have a picture with him and his wife, but we were not allowed to talk with him.
So we sent him the picture with our request for the interview, as we knew that, at least in this time, he was answering every written letter.
He's getting old now, but was very active in 2007. He still had 200 employees at the Carter Center. After the interview, we knew that we had to make a documentary essay to tell the mostly forgotten story to a broader audience.
The panel we had delivered 1 year before was then already part of the permanent show in the Carter Museum. During the first trip in 2006, we were not successful in handing over the panel to the Museum of American History. George W. Bush was still president. In 2009, after Barack Obama took over, it suddenly was possible. It's not on permanent exhibit, but they take it out occasionally, they say. For example, when the US premiere of A Road Not Taken at the Environmental Film Festival in DC was hosted at the Museum of American History.
So Carter was right. It became a curiosity, a museum piece. It's now in one of the safer places on Earth. But of course, it's also it also has become a constant reminder of a road not taken.
And unfortunately, it's collecting dust again. So that's where those two projects overlap. Exactly in the year, well, when we had the panel in the car to transport it from Maine to DC to hand it over to the Museum of American History, we made a stop in Philadelphia to visit the Tacony Historical Society. That was after 1 year after the biennial, where we had shown some pictures of the society. For the first time, then we met Luis Iatarola in person, who was extremely supportive during the project in Cairo, and even sent us some original pictures and maps for the show in Cairo. And these pictures were relatively new in the Historical Society, as Luis had met grandchildren of Frank Schumann by accident, not very long ago. So this is key.
An amazing coincidence happened. It's fate, I think, if you believe in a higher power, because I chair the zoning committee for the Tacony Civic Association. I'm now the president, but a few years ago when I was chairing the zoning committee, there was a case which we're still involved with down on Keystone Street. And I had to testify at court, and there were two sides to this case. And the lawyer representing one of the sides was from a law firm called Scott and Schumann from Delaware County, Delaware State, the state of Delaware. So I proceed to call him, and his name is slipping me. I think I gave you his name. It's not Arthur, because his father was Arthur. But there have been a couple Schumanns I spoke with, Mark, and then Arthur's son, and his name is just completely slipping me, but he's the lawyer. Mark is a scientist, interestingly enough, he's a chemist. He's one of Schumann's grandchildren. The other grandchild, I just cannot remember his name for the life of me, but I have it somewhere. His father was Arthur. And at the end of the conversation, talking about the zoning case, I said, I recognize your name, Schumann. Is there any connection to the Frank Schumann that was from Tacony? And he said, that was my grandfather. And that was the way I got to know the Schumann family. Had nothing to do with the Historical Society at all. It just happened to be that I came across him in legal circles as part of a zoning case that had to do with Tacony, but only because he was representing a former property owner. Had nothing to do with his connection to Tacony at all. It's a pretty ironic, pretty amazing sort of a conversion.
So now a picture from the backside of the solar installation in Cairo and some more background information.
We got to know from the 1913 Schumann solar installation from a scientist who gave us this book in 2007, after we had the first shows on the Jimmy Carter solar installation. And the title is Technical Dreams, and it was published 1922 from a company in Zurich. So there's somehow a direct link. So that's why we knew there was this solar installation. And when we were invited for the Cairo Biennial, we totally knew that we were going to research this more, even much more unknown solar plant from Cairo on site.
So, as you know, Frank Schumann came to from Brooklyn to Tacony. He already had patented wired glass, which was his biggest financial success.
This is a solar plant Schumann has built in Tacony. There already were many other examples of solar-driven machines before, but Schumann's attempt was to, or his focus was to make them simple and cost-effective. In Egypt, he originally wanted to build a simple installation like the one on the picture. But the British partners pushed through a much more sophisticated design with moving mirrors that always face the sun. Actually, a technique that is still used in large thermal solar plants.
This installation was more expensive, had to be reduced in scale, became less powerful, and couldn't be built out of prefabricated parts. But somehow they managed to convince the shareholders of the Sun Power Company.
The plant was built near a wealthy neighborhood of Cairo, where still today there's many embassies, to demonstrate the technology. The joke is, they even pumped the water back into the Nile. There was no fields, no cotton fields to irrigate. And Schumann had to solve a lot of technical problems. This is, for example, the first version of the radiators that melted away. They were out of sync and they were getting too hot. A lot of engineering went into the pump because it had to run on relatively small temperature difference. So it was really developed for this installation.
Now you see a picture from the opening in July 1913.
Frank Schumann, well, he successfully could demonstrate that solar power in Egypt was cheaper than the coal shipped from Great Britain, which was the current alternative. But, in the same time, some large oil fields were found in Iran. And then also First World War ended the endeavor completely. The engineers were called back to their homelands, and Schumann never came back to Cairo and started to invent weapons like submarines.
We couldn't find out what really happened to the plant. Most likely is that it was disassembled for the steel.
So back to the Biennale project. Our main attempt was to bring back this story to Egypt. So that was the focus of all our 3 parts. Part 1 was this publication.
So we invited the Egyptian writer Becky George, who lives between Cairo and Zurich, to introduce a poor craftsman from the Upper Nile to the known story with Schumann and Lord Kitchener. He wrote the text in Arabic, and then it was translated to English.
I can tell you my view. This is what we call it high points in the story of Mr. Schumann. Okay? You have the land, you have the workers, you have the plane, you have the investor. He's completely in the top of his projects. Boom! Telegraph, bringing back to reality.
So the small booklet was printed in both languages and was a giveaway in the exhibition, as you can see in the picture. You can also see in the picture hanging on the wall the original photographs from Tacony.
Outside, just a couple of meters away, in front of the main venue, we rebuild a segment in the scale of the original installation. We had the blueprints from the patent of the solar engine and asked a friend and engineer to help us with drawing the parts. So with these plans, we went to Cairo and tried to find workers who could help us with the installation.
So we did actually the same as Schumann did. We traveled only with the blueprints to Cairo. And yes, found the workers.
As Schumann did in 1912.
And to our surprise, we discovered while our stay in Tacony in 2009, so after the biennial happened, that some parts of our invented story became true.
While looking through the archival material, we saw the backsides of the pictures for the first time.
So the invented character Salama, for example, turned out to be one of the workers named Rashti.
Part 3 of the project. Part 3 of the project or of the contribution was an information kiosk with some posters and wall writings at the spot where the solar plant must have been placed.
A person with us was at the kiosk every day during the time of the exhibition to collect possible memories of the people and tell the story of the 1913 solar plant.
To find the place where the solar installation formally was built, a map from the Historical Society was very helpful when we were the first time in Cairo. A second map from a local Jewish historian gave was also very important, but this historian thought the installation must have been on a different place. So when we put all the 3 maps together, we were pretty sure that we found the place. And funnily, it was a plot where which was empty, which you can see in the next picture. Of course, we wanted to enter the space with a metal detector, but we were not allowed by the owner. In Egypt, nobody wants to find something in the earth because that could mean the digging might render the land worthless. The only possibility is when the land gets a building permit.
So actually we missed a little bit this opportunity because last year, as you can see in the following slide, happened something to the place.
In 2018, 19, 20. So it has become a parking lot.
So actually we think the 30 minutes are gone.
No, are they?
Yeah, I think so. And yes, I think we stop here for the moment and with our presentation and the statement from Frank Schumann from 1914, which is still yeah, it's still true. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all so much. That was wonderful. And I think those photographs like alone were worth the cost of admission. And I really like, and even just Kristen and I met, what was his name? The guy that runs the Historical Society, Kristen?
Louis.
Louis, yeah. Totally such a generous person. It's nice kind of like meeting him and having that connection as well. But I guess we wanted to open up this discussion, but before I guess we kind of, so if anyone has any questions, please enter them into the chat. We are going to begin with a few questions from Kristen and I. And Kristen, do you want to go ahead and jump in?
Sure. Should we keep the screen? Oh, there we go. Yeah, I think I just would start like simply by saying like, thank you. And a big thing that's on my mind is that, these are older works of yours that we've found, relevant now. And I wonder what it means for us to ask you to revisit them now and find them still relevant today.
Actually, it was just the last couple of days we went through all this material, and as we told the interview with Louis, we went through that material and we found it really very interesting to see that like 10 years later and to think, wow, this was, I think all those 3 projects were kind of transformative to us. Is it the right word? Because, it came quite fast after each other. It was between 2006 and 2009, basically. We had a couple of years more to finish the movie. But this took every energy we had of our life to do all this work together. And it was a very, I think we today said it was a very interesting time, also with this Imagine to be like a younger artist and getting the possibility to get an interview with Jimmy Carter. Everything was very exciting. And still is very, I think, important to us. I think even, the manifesto, even if you read it today, you say, wow, there's some quirks in it, but it was very important for our upcoming as a art duo. So I think these early works are very important. The first work we did together was because we had no opportunity to show our work. We transformed a bike trailer and invited people to a certain point where we went with the bikes to another place, and then there was a small intervention happening, which was unknown. And I think that these early projects are very important anyway.
You know, I watched A Road Not Taken today, and something that I hadn't noticed the first time around was, Christina, you call the solar panels and A Road Not Taken the main actors. And I was thinking about the choice to center the technology. So in both stories, you're talking about Jimmy Carter's solar array and then Frank Schumann's solar engine, and the physical objects become this access point to tell these histories, to retell these histories. So I just was wondering what your relationship as artists is to object making and technology, and what does it mean to rematerialize and recontextualize these historical artifacts to shape the narrative?
Yeah, I think this is the chance in arts, isn't it? That you can confront people with objects, with physical or virtual stuff, but most of the time in a space not at home. So it's a confrontation outside. And we are really convinced that this confrontation can be an intervention for rethinking times, behavings, even hopefully can change the mindset in a way.
Informative.
Okay.
And we can keep going. We have lots of questions, but if anyone wants to chime in, just let us know. So your films are centering solar power, but you know, really the most interesting parts isn't the technology, but the inadequate systems that you know, inhibit their implementation. So could you talk a little bit how the narratives developed as you, over time, how did they unfold as you were kind of recording them? And were you surprised by anything along the way? And I guess, like, you sort of talked a little bit about, you know, the challenges to kind of accessing Jimmy Carter, but was there anything that him or his administration, his former administration, wouldn't talk about? Just want like the gossip, like the hot gossip.
Actually, we were surprised that he was so honest. He even said some things he hadn't had to say. So no, it was actually the opposite. And we also, other people we interviewed, we always felt like we not even had to push the door. It was really too open, you know.
Well, we have to say this was 2006 during Bush administration, and there was a lot of frustration in those fields in the solar community, and there's one thing that was surprised us, you know, the interview with Jimmy Carter opened other doors, because they told us, you know, he has some good shit detector, and he wouldn't have invited us without somehow screening us. So they would, you know, like the Gordon Stewart, for example, the speechwriter. I think he wouldn't have us let in his house if there was not this interview before. What else?
Well, we have a question from the audience from Rebecca Macklin. They ask, when working to recover the presence of solar power in Cairo, did you engage with the place of colonialism in this history? I'm thinking about how British colonialism was integral to both facilitating and bringing an end to the development of Schumann's project.
Well, that's an interesting question, because we had kind of an assistant who helped us with translations and to find workers.
Yeah, you see him also in the movie, the guy who is talking to the one who paints.
And he, on one of the last days when we were there, he asked us if we really think if solar power would have been a success in Cairo after 1913, if they wouldn't have found oil, if it would have been of any help for the Egyptians. And I had to agree, no, maybe solar colonialism would have been even worse. We don't know. And that made us really think that we never asked us this question before. And I think that's a point, that's a point. We don't know what, if we had completely covered the Sahara by now, and the Egyptian would have to stay somewhere in other countries. We don't know.
Yeah. It might have been another point of access for colonialism, or maybe it could have been
obviously
more efficient in some ways. So it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, we had definitely been wanting to ask about that, and so often because solar is kind of like invisible, it has this like kind of ethereal quality because it comes from the sun. It kind of ignores its history of extractivism, like taking up space, like you're saying, and so we were wondering, who Schumann really was, like where his kind of motivations lie, and who stands to benefit from the fulfillment of solar futures. So it's something that I'm glad that Rebecca brought that question up. Was Schumann like the Elon Musk of that time?
Well, actually, it's very obvious that he was a Republican in this time, and he wanted to earn money. He had 64 patents, I think. So he was a career thinker, I'm pretty sure. And I think
he was really deeply convinced as well that solar power will save the world, and we in future generations, and also in this range as well, that it's more healthy than coal. So there must have been a dusty or dust gradient in Philadelphia already in the beginning of the 20th century to reduce the coal emission out of the chimneys.
So another question, about this idea of the tangibility of solar, and there's a couple, it always still feels abstract to me because it feels like it's here but not here. It's this available technology, but we haven't fully implemented it to its full potential. So it feels abstract, but there's a couple examples of alternative power in A Road Not Taken that felt really especially tangible. And so these scenes were kind of slow and clunky and even awkward at times. And I'm thinking of when the two students from Unity College show Roman how to fill up the biodiesel tank, and they even describe it as a kind of disgusting two-person job, I think they said. And at the end of the film, Roman, you take a bath with the warm water from the solar power, and in like a Tupperware in a parking lot. And so I'm just thinking about, I'm just like appreciating these moments where it kind of demonstrates the effort and challenge of moving away from fossil fuels, unlike a slick techno fix that might gloss over the path to renewables. So could you comment on those scenes and how you see them connected to the larger arc of your work?
Yeah, it's very funny. I mean, was a little bit also joking around, you know, because the joke was in the end that we used peanut oil to drive even faster, and peanuts is the main crop, the main crop in Plains where Jimmy Carter was grown up. So yes, and it was really difficult to find sometimes also enough used grease during the trip. We spent
hours finding
from going from dumpster to dumpster. So this is not a part of the movie, but yes, it shows actually as well that it's sometimes not so easy. Just drive into the gasoline station, have a fill up, and then drive away again. And the scene with the bath, actually, it was just before we had to hand over the solar panel to the Carter Museum. And we really wanted to once test it, that it really still works. And that was the only last moment we could do it.
It was basically in the parking lot of the museum, and then we handed it over. They took it with white gloves after we just have moved it and used it. And then we asked them.
No, we didn't ask, they laughed. And then we looked at them, and everybody watched the scene through the observation cameras. Yeah.
So they were basically part of the what did you say?
Striptease.
Yeah.
That was my assumption, that it was the museum parking lot, but so I'm glad.
Well, actually, we didn't know where to go. You know, it would have been even more strange to do it in front of the Walmart or some in a huge parking slot. So we thought this was kind of a bit cozy, the coziest place we knew in Atlanta. So that's why we did it there.
So funny.
Huh? Okay.
That's so funny. Yeah.
It's a nice like symbolic ritual to kind of transfer the power over the panel over. Kind of a beautiful thing.
I just ask myself all the time. No, I'm joking here a little bit, but what would we have done if it wouldn't have worked? Would we have given a broken one?
Kristen, do you want to ask one more? And then we'll jump into audience
Just
questions.
jump into some other ones. Let me, I'm a little.
I do like the next one on the list.
Right, about, so yeah, it kind of follows up with the first, like the convenience of gas and oil. And, you know, you highlight the 1970 energy crisis, which seems, you know, kind of be irrelevant to Americans just kind of wanting their gas. They don't seem to be tracing, in the footage you share, they don't seem to be tracing back the root of the problem. And actually someone in the film describes the American entitlement to oil as a, quote, birthright. When Carter tries to speak directly to the American people and ask them to use less energy as a patriotic act, it doesn't work, unsurprisingly. And as Swiss citizens, I was curious, what was it like for you to unearth this piece of American history, and how might you connect it to the present moment? I mean, actually, we're witnessing a current energy crisis play out in Texas. So, yeah.
Well, as Swiss, in the first place, we were surprised that there was already a post-petrol president. You know, we were surprised by the fact, and you know, if you see what they tried to do in this time, and even read, there was an environmental report during that time that even mentioned climate change, or was already thinking about climate change. So this was state of the art. So we have to say, I think in this sense, Switzerland was a bit behind.
Mm.
Or it was a little bit before. In Switzerland, you could feel the oil crisis in 1973 very hard, or it was very obvious. So the highways were closed, and people walked on the highways and went with the bikes on it. But the energy crisis of 79 wasn't really feasible
in Europe.
Mm.
And then, of course, well, we know what happened. It was with the Reagan presidency. I think the budget was reduced 90%, and the Germans and the Japanese companies took over the research. Also in Switzerland, the financing went down a lot, so it's not that different. Switzerland in the 80s, they had a strong solar community. There was a Tour de Sol, a solar car race every year, and then they started as tinkers as well. You know, there was the first race was hilarious, you would say, like crazy guys with solar vehicles, and then it started to be more and more professional. But this ended somewhere in the 90s, I think. And well, you know, we're not used to that totally crazy two-partisan government. That's something we haven't experienced. We have a strong, let's say, I would say a right-wing party, which is the biggest party, but we never have a total takeover of this party, of the system. What you experience, I think, in the United States, which is difficult to survive. I think, you know, it's tearing apart everywhere, I guess.
But the amazing thing was that when President Trump took over, the same happened actually again. Even he tried to destroy or even destroyed scientific work, what President Reagan as well did. And this is something which is really completely a no-go. And I think this also was the reason why we are now so much behind.
Yeah, because I mean, the U.S. is such a superpower economically that they can guide what programs get pushed into the future, and so just creating that psychosymbolic shroud that I guess maybe began probably before Reagan, but was, you know, kind of rendered at 100% opacity with Trump. It's just such a kind of, it's going to be like a feat of magic to get around it or push it out of the way. But
yeah, it's difficult to see the strongest country to drive to change direction every 4 years. That's or 8 years, you have to say. That's a pity.
So we have a few more questions from the audience. This one is from Rani Kanafani. And Rami asks, after watching The Road Not Taken, I'm wondering how you approach the transformation of one panel into an art object whose place in a museum where it does not have its intended original function, but performs a different one. So my question is, what is that new function of the panel in the museum to you? Is it a sign of hope and recognition that would bring renewed awareness to environmental problems today? Or is it a sign of surrender and submission to the fact that as soon as a seemingly radical act such as changing energy policy comes up against political divides, it is bound to fail, representative of the environmental challenges that the US and the rest of the world face today? That's a big question.
I think for us it's mostly, well, it's not, we always had these discussions how if we use it as a fetish, this object, and I think we didn't make it an art object. It's not in an art museum, and for us it's at the right places.
It's very important that it's at the National Museum of American History because it's a mark stone and it should be remembered.
But I think for us it's something which reminds us of this road not taken. That's obviously what we think it's the symbolic, where the symbolic lies. That in the 70s, even there's pictures from California where thermal solar power was on the most houses in the early 20th century. So it's not, it's not the first cycle, it's already the second cycle. And maybe Daniel knows other cycles from building structures or how.
Yeah, I was saying third or fourth in my head, but
Okay. Let's talk about that later. Now I lost my thread. Yeah.
It's the cycle in the milestone. And again, how many years we lost, or are we behind where we could have been if we would have taken the other road?
But I wouldn't say it's a sign of surrender or submission, because I think cultural processes go relatively slow, and it's very important to have these pioneers like Carter, and there was so many people trying to do something in the 70s, and there was a lot of research done, which is the basis for the photovoltaics, which is the main solar energy used today. This was all financed through that years. So sometimes we don't, of course, we're late in climate change, but on the other side, if we hadn't those pioneers, we would be much worse off, I think.
Yeah, in a way, just the process of making the film, of delivering the solar panels, is a way to kind of like reignite that symbolic capacity of that object in a way. And so the fact that we're talking about it, remembering it, it's kind of putting it back into the stream of consciousness. It's not like, it's kind of made its path back into the cycle. Maybe it'll be the origin of the, but like, riffing off what Daniel said, maybe the fifth or sixth movement, it's like, it's an important image. And I think that's why me and Kristen were kind of obsessed with these two works in a way, just because they were, you realize that there was this Jimmy Carter was, he didn't submit, he submitted a proposal for something new, and, it wasn't like a submission. But it's kind of like exciting to see these works kind of recovering that line of history that maybe isn't over. We have, I'll move on to the next question from Charles Rowe. Charles Rowe asks, from which magazine did Peter Marbach of Unity College find out that Carter's solar panels were put away in government warehouse storage? In what context was the article written? Also, why did the US government decide to quote unquote save the solar panels in a warehouse? Did they have any purpose other than just removing the panels from the White House? So I guess this is like a note in the detective story that was the project.
Actually, I would have to go back, or we would have to go
but
back.
It's in the movie.
But I think it's normal that government stuff gets into these service warehouses, and then after a certain times, schools or colleges can apply to get this stuff. And this was in a kind of program for reusing governmental infrastructure for, I'd say, poor colleges, which the Unity College is not a very rich place. I think that's how Peter Marbach got them, but he read it in an article, and
I think it's said in, or Peter Marbach talks about it.
In the film, he says it's in Utne Reader.
Yeah.
RD Reader.
And
Yes.
I'm sure the administration didn't save the panels. They had to store it because it belongs to the former president.
So Sarah Alajimi asks, it was striking to see the scale of human involvement in both films, where energy policies in the first film, A Road Not Taken, come from top-down and bottom-up initiatives, yet we see a misalignment between technology and operation. One instance in the film, when one of the interviewees concludes that telling the truth in President Jimmy Carter's administration had led to the defeat in the presidential election. Telling the truth and stressing over important challenges of our modern age require a consideration of the average general public to address the environmental urgency. What were your approaches in acknowledging the general public who are not decision makers and don't have the privilege of environmental sciences? How has art and filmmaking informed your way of thinking and approaching the everyday life of people?
Oh. Yeah.
I think I do not think in these categories of people. They have knowledge to get the circumstances, or and others they do. I think we all approachable, and I think especially through movies, like you have the emotion as well, which is taking you through and maybe changing kind of your perspective.
Yeah, and it feels like just like for me watching the film, The Road Not Taken feels more in line with a more traditional documentary film, which I feel in a lot of ways is like a very clearly communicative genre. It's just I don't feel like there's very much experimentation there, and I feel like it makes itself very much legible. Whereas Son of 1913 is more of a document of this gestural action kind of overlaid with a straightforward narrative. I mean, I really I feel like that it says more about like y'all's kind of like very kind of I don't know, inclusive, widely varied practice, because you kind of move between event, film, documents, publishing, and so I feel like there doesn't seem to be a hierarchy in your practice, which I appreciate. Is that, and is that something that's just defined by the subject that you're encountering or you're engaging with, or is that more something that you plan?
We think it's, it was our first documentary. It took us some time, and we had no financial support. It's kind of a do-it-yourself, almost everything project. A friend of us was making the music, and it's totally low or no budget, and I think so. It's a very simple story, that if you try to do something, sometimes you're lucky. You know, there's no like very abstract thinking behind it. And you know, we in these projects we like to find out something, and that's the basic energy for us, is to find out things and maybe to alter the reading of the history, because we say like every generation has to reread history and to
rewrite history.
Or rewrite history. And also in the project in Cairo, that we found out the place, you know, like there's new insights. It's not a project about those solar panels. It's to get know more about it for us. You know, that's the first that gives us energy to do it. That's the main motor.
Yeah, but Ricky, you're completely right. I mean, we working in so different, or with such different media, and it's always the subject which is or makes the decision to choose film, photo, and writing, publication, etc., etc.
I really get the sense, and just I think that's what's so captivating about the work, is just because the question seems to be embedded in like, or like the kind of answering the question seems to be embedded in the making of the thing. And I think that's like where all that kind of pragmatism kind of aligns with me in my mind, and the art making, or the artworks and the making of the works by, you know, artists like you and other artists that are involved in this project. Is just that kind of like asking a very pertinent question that's of our time and experience, but like working through it, answering it with the material that's at hand. We have a couple of more questions before we go today. This one seems to be particularly seems pretty specific. It's do you have thoughts about the German government's plans to develop green hydrogen in North Africa as a way to meet their climate goals instead of expanding wind energy in Germany? I don't know anything about that.
Oh yeah,
that sounds like a really good question.
I'm not sure if I'm totally on the last thing. There was this Desert Tech project where they tried to combine the most influential companies.
Actually, they approached us as well for the Schumann project. So they, I think they wrote 2 articles in the Desert Tech magazine.
But then they had somehow to find out. Well, I think that the construction was not really good, and they had to find out that there's more power flowing from Europe to the northern African countries than the way back, and they found out it's cheaper to produce solar energy in Germany than to transport it from northern Africa, and it was more secure to do it in Germany. That was finally the last straw. To be honest, I think in the future I could imagine that this is going to happen, to be honest. But I think firstly these countries should solve their energy problems with solar, you know, and try to do it themselves. And then I can imagine that it can be a way to store energy from the summer season to the winter season. That I can imagine that this is possibly a way to do it.
So we have maybe time for maybe one or two more questions. Bethany, you have the next question. Do you want me to ask it for you, or would you like to ask it yourself?
Well, you've been doing such a good job asking for everyone else. But I'll ask it because it would be too weird, I think. It's really a question about the changing sort of emotional landscape that you may find yourself in. The longer the road not taken, the further away it is from us, it seems more and more sort of sad, frankly. I first saw A Road Not Taken, I think 2 years ago, thanks to Kristen and Ricky introducing me to your work. And even in the 2 years between then and watching it again several times this past week, I found myself, thinking like, this is incredibly sad to watch this. And I wondered how that changing emotional landscape amidst the worsening climate crisis is affecting your work, if at all.
Well, actually, I personally go through a cycle myself. You know, like when I was studying environmental science in the late 80s until mid 90s, and in the early 90s we were organizing climate demonstrations, and they in this time it was kind of an more experimental time. People just took cars and put them on the roof. So that was the way we demonstrated for climate. It became totally unthinkable in the time between. And when I was at the first Fridays for Future demonstration, I nearly had tears in my eyes. 30 years and nobody was really doing something, and now it's here again. So to be honest, I'm a little bit more hopeful than like 10 years ago. So I think also with this pandemic, we can learn that change is possible. We can spend more money for things we thought it's totally impossible. So I'm not so negative at the moment.
Yeah, but probably you're not so negative because of the pandemic, which shows that we able to change. And I mean, it's incredible what's going on. I mean, we're doing a research every day. We're photographing or taking pictures from the sky. And during the lockdown, it was dark blue. No contrails at all. So what we are going to do when everybody can fly again, and will we hold on and say it's good for future generations that we stop now, or will we due to economics go ahead with what we've done before? But yeah, I think the sad thing is also when we went through the materials for the presentation is that it's so current, so contemporary still. And on the other hand, it's also amazing how far thinking people have been.
There's definitely a foundation for that kind of thinking prior to us, and I think I'm doing a talk sometime next month with a director that made a film about the Rainbow Coalition and Fred Hampton in Chicago, and it's interesting seeing artists recover this history that feels still so fresh and still so like so concrete, and the problems are still very present, but there has already been like very clear articulation as to like how to address those problems, at least in the beginning. And I think it's like inspiring to just see that kind of recovery of old methods, practices, ideas. I think maybe one more question before we break, you guys. This one's from Juan Salazar. Juan asks, as industry becomes decarbonized, much of the metabolisms of cultural institutions and foundations is supported by the surplus generated from privatized energy production. This implied the cultural sector in the U.S. Needs to go through a decarbonizing phase. Does Europe offer any models from your perspective on how to go through this?
Actually, it's a very good question. I'm not 100% sure, but the most cultural institution in the art world in Europe they need money from outside, but they're much better financed from the public than in the US. So they don't have to do this fundraising. They do this fundraising, but it's like I would say between 20 to 40%, and they have like a basic income which they can finance the institution on a certain level. And I think that makes cultural institutions much more or much less or much more independent or less dependent on sponsors. And to be honest, in Switzerland, for example, certain cultural institutions would never take money from certain companies. You know, like it would be difficult for some institution to get funding from Nestle or from bigger companies. Some would do, some would not do. But there would be a big, yeah, but some institution would never take that money. Some, yes. But I think the question is, on the one side, how can you finance culture without 100% fundraising? And the second question, of course, is if you see green investments at the moment, they are making so much money. At least here in Europe, the pension funds, they all go into environmental or sustainable indexes, which is also a difficult thing. But then there must be new winners, and those new winners, they probably might want to spend some money for the cultural world as well. I don't know.
So Juan, no really a model?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. I guess I could. Thanks for answering my question. Yeah, I guess part of it, because as this, what's happening in Texas is kind of putting a lot of things into perspective, including the fact that it operates an independent grid. And many of the really significant cultural institutions in Texas are disproportionately funded by fossil fuel industry. Most of the board members are comprised of fossil fuel executives. And so it seems like if we go through a rapid decarbonization, that also means that it would be a very sudden shift, because there would be kind of directly related but potentially like unforeseen collateral as a result across different sectors, including the cultural sector. So as there's advocacy for publicly owned energy production, it also seems like there also has to be sort of a kind of earmarked policy that finds funds for cultural institutions that otherwise would need the funds from fossil fuel industries. Yeah, it seems it's just like an entangled mess, and
maybe the model could be that we artists, when we would have, or we will be invited from this institution, we could say yes, but then doing a work which has the subject, or this is exactly the subject of the work or your contribution.
Thank you guys for
Yeah, and I feel like, and I feel like too is just I think we're something about like just working like in this space without like kind of like so much constant desire to kind of go out, visit museums, go out and kind of like inhabit and use those institutions. I feel like in my perspective, I feel like we're kind of learning to live without some of those things, and so maybe that kind of helps us think through like what that might look like if, you know, because in a lot of ways we're watching a lot of these institutions, these that are funded by these large kind of fuel organizations, you know, give up on their staff and let go of their, you know, the people that aren't as necessary as so maybe we'll also learn to fend for ourselves and make culture outside of those structures as well. So I don't know, that might be a benefit of that process as well.
Yeah, the good thing about artists, we do it anyway. No?
Yes, very true.
I think that's a really wonderful note to conclude this conversation on. Let's hope that academic researchers who are beset by some of the same perils of funding that the culture industry is will also carry on our research. There's a lot of conversations around this topic that are coming up, not least next week, same time, same place. When we have the solar panel, I've dropped the link in the chat for you all. Really hope to see you here. And Daniel has alerted you also to PPEH is hosting the SUCP, the Settler Colonial City Project, which is also on the Petro Culture Complex. Really excited about all of this programming. Mostly really super grateful to you, Christina and Roman, for joining us so late at night where you are at home. Really grateful for you being here. Thank you also to Kristen and Ricky for such excellent moderation. And thank you to all of you guests of PPEH. We hope to see you again very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Well, thanks, Bethany.
good night.
Great discussion,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night,
Sleep well.
Bye.